Good morning, it's 9:30 on Friday the 7th of July, and this is Britain's Newsroom, here on GB News with me, Tom Harwood, and Ellie Costello.
Coming up for you today. Andy Murray continues his fight to make it into the third round of Wimbledon. He's looking good at the moment. Paul Coit will be here with the update.
And Rishi Sunak could face an upcoming fifth by-election after the MP Chris Pincher was recommended to be suspended for 8 weeks from the Commons.
GB News launched our Don't Kill Cash campaign on Monday. Nearly 160,000 of you have signed up to support this. We're going to be joined by Charlie Mullins. And you'll like this as well. The US pop star Meghan Trainor has called her baby Barry. So is it time to bring back Barry? Should we be bringing back these old-fashioned names?
Well, some people might not think of them as old-fashioned names. Perhaps to people like the pop star Meghan Trainor, they're the height of modernity. But do get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.com. What names would you like us to bring back? Perhaps a new wave of Barrys. There's already a new wave of Alfies that have come about, so what's next?
Yeah, let us know what you think. But first, let's get the news update with Rhiannon.
Ellie, thank you. Good morning. It's 9:30, your top stories from the GB Newsroom. House prices fell at the fastest yearly rate in 12 years last month. Halifax reports the average UK property price was down 2.6% in June compared with the same month last year. That's more than double the drop in May, marking the largest fall since 2011. The mortgage provider says the average house price for June was around £286,000. Energy giant Shell says its gas profits are significantly lower in the second quarter of the year. The oil and gas firm says trading's been impacted by seasonal shifts in the market in the first 3 months. It also expects an adjusted loss of between $600 and $800 million for the quarter. Last year, trading helped Shell deliver record profits amid volatility in European natural gas prices. The Deputy General Secretary of the National Education Union says it will be a real failure for the government in all 4 teaching unions if they vote to strike together. It comes as teachers across England are walking out for a second day in the latest wave of strike action over pay. Members of the National Education Union warn there could be more strikes in the autumn term. The government offered a one-off £1,000 payment for this year, as well as a 4.5% pay rise for next. But all 4 education unions have rejected the offer, asking for a 6.5% increase. The police are failing the public too often, according to a new report. His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services says there are still significant shortcomings in key areas. That's despite progress being made in recording crime. The report says some of the issues include skill shortages and long call delays. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now, though, it's back over to Tom and Ellie.
Good morning and welcome to Britain's Newsroom with Tom Harwood and me, Ellie Costello. It's Friday, July the 7th. The time is 9:32 and thank you so much for your company this morning. We've got a few great stories that we want to chat to you about alongside, of course, the top stories that we're going to be delving into throughout the programme. But this is one that's caught our eye this morning, Weetabix. We're asking, how do you eat your Weetabix in the morning?
This is interesting because the television presenter James May put out a tweet just a few days ago saying, who on earth puts the milk in before they put in their cornflakes? But it wasn't cornflakes who replied to him, it was Weetabix. And Weetabix posted a video on Twitter saying the proper way to do it is milk first and Weetabix second. And this got me incensed.
So it's like you've dunk it.
I think this is sacrilegious.
Oh.
I think this is utterly wrong. I think my whole world has frankly been turned upside down by this video that the official Weetabix Twitter account posted this week.
Oh, you have? Oh, we haven't got a copy of it. I was waiting for the video of that one.
We'll try and get the video a little bit later on.
What do you think is the right way to eat Weetabix?
Obviously, Weetabix first, milk second. You pour it on. You pour in the milk.
So I would think that's the way to do it. But I like it. I like a warm Weetabix. So I think you put your Weetabix in the bowl or any other type of cereal. Then you pour the milk in and you pop it in the microwave for 2 minutes so it's nice and stodgy and warm.
Stodgy? I absolutely reject this. The only stodgy thing in the morning should be porridge. If you want to have porridge, have porridge. If you want to have Weetabix, don't put it in the microwave.
Wow,
I think we might have this video of the Weetabix, of the way they say you should have your Weetabix. Let's take a look. Now, for those listening on the radio, there's milk being poured into a bowl here by the official Weetabix hand, I suppose. It's quite a nice hand. It's got some...
hand model.
Right, what a job. And the Weetabix has been plonked in there second. That's what Weetabix themselves has put out on social media.
I suppose if you want it to be hard, like a hard Weetabix biscuit, that's the way to do it. But I like it softer.
If you want to have a biscuit, don't use milk at all.
Well, yeah, some people do that. But let us know how you take your cereal in the morning. Is that the correct way to do it? Milk first, or are you a bit like me? Should it be put in the microwave? Do let us know. It's certainly making us talk.
It is. But there is actually bigger news going on today as well. It's not just baby names and Weetabix. Today there are some enormous stories that we're going to get to. There's by-elections. There's, of course, the issue... before we get all to that, why don't we take a little look at Wimbledon? Yeah,
why don't we? Because it's a significant anniversary today, isn't it? 10 years ago today, Andy Murray won the men's singles title at Wimbledon. And he's currently fighting for a place in the third round of this year's competition. And he was looking strong on centre court last night before play was cut off at 11 p.m.
But the second round match will resume today, and Paul Coynt joins us now. And Paul, thank you
for Andy, for Weetabix, no milk.
Do you reckon?
Oh, no question.
Oh.
Yeah, he'd have no problem.
He's a hardy Scot.
He is a hardy Scot.
Absolutely. No soggy Weetabix for him.
He'll probably sue and say it should be porridge right now. But my
will.
goodness, I was saying earlier, this guy's unbelievable. I know there's still a few Murray doubters and there's people that are around saying, oh, I don't really like Andy Murray. I don't really know what's not to like about this guy. He's a decent man. He's a fantastic family man. He's an unbelievable athlete. And at 36 years old, to be doing what he's doing still and to have gone through the hip operation he's had and kept fighting, all the stuff that we don't see, everything behind the court, everything behind the scenes, just to keep working as he is. Absolutely remarkable. I'm playing Stefanos Tsitsipas, 24 years old, who's the new, was the new guard coming through. And even then, he's now gone 2 sets up. It's been incredible.
Will this have hurt Andy Murray, though? Because... he was playing so well yesterday, and then it had to be called, the lid had to be called on the game.
That's right.
It all had to be moved. It's not playing now until this afternoon.
That's right.
That's not going to be particularly good for him.
Well, there's 2 ways of looking at it. We can look at the fact there was a point during the tie-break and he screamed out that he was in pain and then moved on. I mean, he's the sort of guy that reacts to this sort of pressure and went through and then went 2 sets up. Now, it's Merton Council. They say that it has to end at 11 o'clock. There has to be a curfew because of houses that are around there, whereas, ironically, most of them are probably being rented out by people that are actually come from abroad to actually rent the house to go to Wimbledon. So it has to be 11 o'clock. In the Australian Open, they'll go till 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. Now, it was his game at that point. But then you're right. Then he has to start again. But the warm-up, for example, yesterday, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he's hitting the ball, he's waiting. Then we had the Liam Brodie match, which went 5 sets. Then there was another game. So he didn't go on court until 7:40. It would suit him as a player to play earlier on in the day. He wants to play earlier instead of these late finishes. So let's face it, if you're going to be able to split the game at the age of 36, then it may not be so bad, but he's got to hit the ground running.
Might not be a bad thing. And I mean, a significant anniversary today, 10 years since he last won Wimbledon. Could he do it this year, do you think? He's looking good.
I would love to be able to say yes, Ellie. I'd love to be able to say yes. But every time, I think every Murray fan watched him against Tsitsipas and thinking, you know what, he's 24, he's not going to be able to do it this time, but still he manages to find something. It was his first ever 3-set win at Wimbledon in 10 years, in the last round. It's going to be too much, I would have thought, but obviously we all hope and pray for him. The less the lesser games that he plays, the more, I mean, the amount of sets that he plays, the more chance he's going to stand to actually get further. But obviously, the names are going to get bigger. These are going to be harder games. So we'll see how we go. But I hate to use a sport cliche. You know that, but each game as it comes. Each game as it comes. We've got to take it each one at a time.
So if you were a betting man...
Which I am, heavily. No, I'm not. No, yeah.
Where would you say he's going to come then? It's still early days now. How far through will Andy Murray get this Wimbledon?
Depends on draws. I mean, I think he will win this game. I honestly do. I do think he'll win this match. Now, then it all depends who he's going to play when it's coming up next. We've got people like Alcaraz in the draw. We've got Novak Djokovic, who, of course, we all know about him. That's what I think the final's going to be. So I would say for him to get to the quarterfinals, I think it'd be an amazing performance.
Honestly, I've got hope, Coity. I've got a really good feeling about this. I've got it in my waters, and you know it's good when I put it in my
I'm trying not to tempt fate. That's the thing. I'm a sport guy. I would love to see it. It would be so difficult. But if he did, I mean, my goodness, he's knighted already. Who knows what he should be.
In the House of Lords,
he should be given everything. I think Lord Andy Murray could do a lot worse. Yeah. So I think he would be magnificent there.
That'd be good, wouldn't it? And we've got to have a word about Cam Norrie, haven't we? How's he doing?
Cam Norrie Cam Norrie's playing, but really the other guy that we should mention is also Liam Brodie that played yesterday, because Liam Brodie, who's from Stockport, and he's had to pretty much fund himself, and it was a wild card, so he managed to get in, and he was playing yesterday against Casper Ruud, who's number 4 seed from Norway. Nobody gave him a hope, but with the Wimbledon crowd, see, this is what's going to help Andy.
Yeah.
I mean, when you see Andy, the amount of people that scream at every moment, "Come on, Andy, come on, Andy." It's just, I was the only person that actually didn't shout it because...
Why weren't you shouting?
Well, I had to protect my voice for today. So that was the only reason. But I was semaphoring it, but everybody was so behind him, and it's the same with any Brit at Wimbledon. So... well done to Liam Brodie, who then moves on, and he's playing Denis Shapovalov now of Canada. Big serving Canadian, so that's going to be very tricky. But always with the crowd behind you, anything's possible.
Yeah, one to watch. It's going to be busy today, isn't it?
Very busy. With that and the Ashes today playing the sport.
Yeah. Lots going on.
Paul, thank you. And I suppose that 11 p.m. curfew, really annoying yesterday. Let's hope that there's no environmental protest that jumps its way on, confettis the lawn again. I mean, there's always anything can happen.
That's the concern. I think Merton Council, though, they should have a look at that, because as Coity was just saying there, most of those houses are rented out to people who are going to Wimbledon anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean,
if Australia run through into the early hours, it's
2 weeks a year, you think you just let them get on with tennis, wouldn't you? You'd think. But let us know what you think of that story or any of the stories that we're talking about today. How do you have your Weetabix in the morning? Let us know. gbviews@gbnews.com.
But moving on, Rishi Sunak is now facing more pressure as the Conservative Party is likely to be hit by yet another by-election.
Well, this comes after MP Chris Pincher is now facing an 8-week common suspension as an inquiry found him groping 2 men at a club in London last year.
Well, let's talk to the political editor of the Huffington Post, Kevin Schofield. And Kevin, this is not what Rishi Sunak wants to hear. Of course, there are already 4 by-elections upcoming that we're expecting. This would be a 5th. Are the Tories going to lose all of them?
I mean, I wouldn't bet against it. I think if they were to lose all of them, it would be a complete disaster, obviously. There's probably a chance you would think they might hold on to maybe 1, possibly 2. But generally speaking, governments mid-term don't win by-elections. Now, it's very unusual to have 5 coming up, especially at a time when the Conservatives are miles behind Labour in the polls. Those polls don't seem to be shifting at all, despite Rishi Sunak's best efforts. So, yeah, I would not be entirely surprised whether to lose all 5. And if they were, then I think we would very quickly see another Conservative Party meltdown.
And Kevin, this is the last thing that Rishi Sunak needs, isn't it? I mean, he stood on the step of Downing Street. I mean, we always talk about steps of Downing Street. There is only, in fact, one. He stood on the step of Downing Street and promised a government of integrity. Whether you like it or not, hearing about Chris Pincher again, it feeds into that narrative, doesn't it, of Tory sleaze. This is literally the last thing he needs.
Absolutely. And the problem when you raise the bar so high and you talk about professionalism and integrity is that the least little thing, it just blows up in your face. And you're right. I mean, obviously, this happened prior to Rishi Sunak becoming Prime Minister. This time last year, it happened. But yeah, it's just another ghost from the past almost that Rishi Sunak is trying to move on from. We've had Boris Johnson in the headlines again over the last few weeks, Partygate once again in the headlines. And again, it's the type of stuff that Rishi Sunak he doesn't want voters to be thinking about it, because as soon as they do, they start remembering what they didn't like about the government, what they didn't like about Boris Johnson, and Rishi Sunak feels the after effects. I think that's part of the reason why we've seen the polls actually, the gap between Labour and Conservatives widen in the last few weeks, because these negative headlines have come back again.
But this by-election is not happening for certain. 99% chance likelihood it will happen. What's the process now for this by-election to take place? The Privileges Committee have recommended a sanction. What happens next?
Yeah, so the report says an 8-week suspension. Now, that has to be approved by Parliament. That's pretty much a formality. So that is enough now to trigger what's called a recall petition. So voters in the Tamworth constituency will get a chance to sign this if they want Chris Pincher to be recalled. That is put up for a by-election. Now, if at least 10% of voters on the electoral roll sign that petition, then a by-election will take place. Now, you've got to imagine 10% is a pretty low bar. You think Labour, Lib Dem, Green voters, I think, will definitely, enough of them will sign it to trigger a by-election. And now we've got 3 coming on July the 20th, probably mid-Bedfordshire once Nadine Dorris gets round to finally resigning her seat, as she said she would do weeks ago. And now this one as well. So those will come in the autumn. And again, just for argument's sake, if he was to lose Rishi Sunak on July the 20th, all 3 of them, it's going to be a pretty miserable summer for him, and then back again in the autumn with another 2 very difficult by-elections to come, going into party conference season. The bad news just keeps coming for Rishi Sunak, and as I say, despite his best efforts to try and get on the front foot on things like immigration, crime, he just doesn't seem to be able to move on, and Labour are taking full advantage.
And with a very difficult summer and a very difficult autumn ahead, is there a possibility, do you think, Kevin, of the Tory party kind of regrouping and renewing ahead of a general election in 2024? Or do you think it will just continue to be haunted by the ghosts of its past?
I mean, they'll have no option really other than to put on some sort of show of unity going into a general election. But if you speak to Conservative MPs around Parliament, they're very downbeat, very miserable. There's been a real noticeable shift in the mood, I think, in the last couple of months. There was those who thought that Rishi Sunak had come in, made a decent start, steadied the ship, and had sort of got them back on the playing field almost. But now the local elections were poor, more and more bad headlines ever since then. And yeah, I think a lot of Conservative MPs are now saying, look, if I can hold on to my seat, that'll be a great advantage for me personally, without even seriously considering the prospect of them forming the next government.
Well, lots to come, and big questions about when Rishi Sunak will actually call that general election. Because I think that the latest he could possibly do it is January 2025, heaven forfend. That would be a very long and cold campaign for everyone. But Kevin Schofield, thank you so much for joining us here on Britain's Newsroom this morning.
And what do you think? Do you think that Rishi Sunak will push it as far as he can? Do you think he'll try and get to January?
Well, that's what Gordon Brown did. Gordon Brown was behind in the polls in the run-up to 2010, and everyone was saying, you're a squatter in Downing Street. When are you going to call this election? And he left it to the last possible moment so that he could be a Prime Minister for 3 years. Would Rishi Sunak, thinking defeat's likely, would he want to sort of stretch out his time in Downing Street for as long as possible? Or might he think, oh, I'm going to throw in the towel here. This is just too difficult. I hate all these bad headlines. I want to move back to sunny California, perhaps.
I don't know. You've got those 5 promises. We've got a long way to go on those 5 promises. You think perhaps he'd try and give himself as long as possible. Let us know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.com.
But now on to the GB News new campaign, Don't Kill Cash.
Yes, as Britain starts moving towards a cashless society, GB News is calling on the government to protect the status of cash as a widely accepted means of payment in the UK until at least 2050.
Now, the GB News Don't Kill Cash campaign is gaining significant momentum. The People's Channel continues its fight to protect vulnerable Britons who rely on cash and, some would argue, are being left behind.
Well, the petition has now topped, pretty incredibly, 163,000 signatures. It only launched on Monday. And this is all, of course, to help save the pound in your pocket. So if you do want to get involved, grab your phone. You can scan this QR code and sign it.
I don't think we have the QR code up quite yet. yet, but we'll get that up in a second. The website to go to is www.gbnews.com/cash.
Yeah. Well, we're joined now by the founder of Pimlico Plumbers, Charlie Mullins. Oh, and there's your QR code for you there. So you can go up to the TV screen now with your phone, scan that in, and you can sign the petition there. But we're joined now by our guest, founder of Pimlico Plumbers, Charlie Mullins, and GB News economics and business editor Liam Halligan to discuss this. Good morning to you both. Really, really good to have you both with us. Charlie, let's start with you, shall we? Why do you feel so passionate about keeping cash in our pockets?
Yeah, well, I think it's unnecessary to change over. There's a lot of people that are not sort of digital savvy, and they're going to suffer by it. Not just old people, many people, like whether it be, you know, charity workers or homeless people on the street, and just anybody that you may even tip, or even in a restaurant. So they're going to suffer by not us having to put our hand in our pocket, you know. And it's also very uncomfortable, I think, giving out your details to every Tom, Dick and Harry. And I think it's just going to cause more fraud. I think people are not going to be able to budget properly, and I think they're going to lose control over the money. And the other thing you've got, of course, children are not going to get used to dealing with money and not understand the value of it.
Like pocket money.
Well, pocket money, gifts, presents, you know, go down the shop and get us something. I just think it's an unnecessary thing. I mean, we're very British. We love the British pound. Why take it away? It's just going to cause so many problems, and I think a lot of overspending is going to happen with people. I think they're just not going to be able to control things. So I don't see it as a good move. I think your campaign's brilliant, and undoubtedly, you know, I'm in on it, and so I'm 163,000 at the moment. Yeah. So why make people suffer when we don't need to? Why shouldn't we just make it easier for them? I mean, do you want to give you... I mean, someone comes up to you in the street, do you want to give them your credit card details? We're already dubious about it. Now we're just saying, oh, go on, take what you want kind of thing. So I think it's a wrong move.
No, certainly this is a campaign that is gathering momentum. But, Liam Halligan, there are some businesses that find it a lot easier to accept card payment, find it a lot easier to accept those quick phone taps, don't necessarily want to be dealing with counting up the till at the end of the day. I remember when I worked in a student bar, that was the bane of my life, having to count all of the money at the end of a day. Are there not some businesses here that would rather move to a cashless society?
There are massive vested interests that want to move to a cashless society. Tom, you've got lots of big businesses. They don't want to incur those cash handling costs, as you say. You've got, you know, governments around the world. They want to make sure that they're getting their tax dollar on everything that we do, so they don't like cash. I think above all, you've got the big tech companies who want to monitor everything that we do through our digital footprint, if you like. Surveillance capitalism, they call it. They can follow what we do, and then they can flog our activities, what we buy, when we buy, how much we pay to third parties, so they can sell us more stuff that we don't need using money that we don't have. Look, there are 5 million of us in the UK who still rely on cash every single day. There are still 6 billion transactions a year in this country that rely on cash. But have a quick look at this graphic. Back in 2012, still 60% of all transactions in this country were cash. It is now 30% because of the rise of smartphones and online transactions, of course. By 2035, it's going to be less than 10%. That's according to UK Finance, the sort of industry body for Britain's banks. And then we've got these cash deserts as well. A fifth of ATMs have closed since 2018, and a lot more closed before that. So for a lot of old people, this is terrible. If you're a little old lady, a little couple, you're driving into a town, you want to park, you haven't even got a smartphone. You know, 10% of Britain's households aren't on the internet. We've got to get real. We are stopping a big chunk of society taking part in society because we are getting rid of cash. So don't kill cash. gbnews.com/cash, and you can push that up to 250,000. Look, we're going to get a parliamentary debate out of this, at least, because we've got 100,000. Let's get it to 250,000 and really make some noise.
And I guess, Liam, as well, the point of all of this is the point of choice. I mean, you can use cards when you want to, when that's convenient for you, but we don't want to kill cash. And this also feeds into the idea of banks closing, doesn't it, Charlie? Because you can be paid cash, but then you've got to find a bank in order to pay it in, and that's becoming more and more difficult.
Yeah, well, I think they're just pushing us into a corner which we don't need. And I think the other problem you're going to have there is, what about when you're out and about and your phone don't work or the card don't work and you've got no cash? it's going to make it very difficult. I think it's just so unnecessary, and I think what they're trying to do, as Liam says, is just put us in a situation where they're controlling us. And look, we've earned the money. We should be able to have it how we want to have it and spend it how we want. I don't want to go in the shop and say, buy my fiancé or... Well, his fiancée, yeah. No, I was going to say our girlfriend, but fiancée.
Hey, congratulations!
Congratulations!
Steady, thank you. And all of a sudden, like, she gets a little note saying, I've spent whatever, man, you know, and you just don't need all that, do you? I mean, it's going to make it so much... And what Liam said was right. So many people are going to be left behind on it. And you've still got people that haven't got bank accounts, you know, some of the older people...
Over 1 million of us, over 1 million UK adults can't get a bank account. Not just because they're Nigel Farage or politically exposed, because the bank doesn't think they've got the bona fides. They might not have been living at an address for a long enough period. They might only be on benefits. If you haven't got a bank account or you haven't got a smartphone, if you're one of the 10% of households not on the internet, so that's older people and some kids, how are you going to do anything?
And then you've got the banks are going to obviously increase their charges. I mean, they charge already for certain card use, and I think that if everybody's taking a card only, they're going to put that charge onto everyone. So, I mean, it's a crazy idea. I mean, you know, we're British, and British people love a pound note in their pocket.
Well, Charlie Mullins and indeed Liam Halligan, thank you so much for talking us through those big issues. There's still so much to come here on Britain's Newsroom, not least our cheap package holidays giving us skin cancer.
And of course, we're going to be talking about how you take your Weetabix in the morning. Milk or cereal first? Let us know. GBnews at gbnews.com. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Pretty hot and sunny for most today, but it's a damp start across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Quite gusty too across western Scotland and through Northern Ireland, but those gusty winds are pushing the rain away. This afternoon we could spark some thunderstorms, particularly to the west of Northern Ireland and across parts of western Scotland. But most places will be dry this afternoon and plenty of very warm sunshine for the bulk of England and Wales. Hotter than yesterday for sure. Temperatures widely into the mid, even high 20s across eastern England, could reach 30 Celsius, and even further north, warmer and more humid than yesterday, with temperatures generally in the low 20s. Going to be pretty warm and sticky tonight as well. Most places staying fine. A balmy summer's evening if you're heading out, but later in the night the cloud will start to increase from the southwest, and it will be a pretty tricky night for sleeping. A humid feel, temperatures in towns and cities staying in the mid or even high teens, and again that humidity likely to be high and noticeable on Saturday. So tomorrow, again, plenty of hot, hazy sunshine over eastern areas and Scotland initially, but thundery showers breaking out initially over Wales, spreading further north and east during the day. Some torrential downpours possible tomorrow afternoon. Not everywhere catching them, but where they do occur, a lot of rain in a short space of time. Gusty winds, hail and lightning too. Pretty warm and humid again in the east, but turning fresher from the west for Sunday.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, it's 10 a.m. on Friday, the 7th of July. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Tom Howard and me, Ellie Costello.
Well, here's what's coming up on the programme today. Rishi Sunak is facing yet more pressure as the Conservative Party is likely to be hit with yet another by-election, taking the upcoming total to 5.
After yesterday's horror crash at a Wimbledon prep school, we'll get the latest from the scene with our reporter.
And are cheap package holidays giving us all skin cancer? Well, we'll be joined with by the oncologist, Professor Carol Sikora.
And this show is nothing without you. So we love to hear from you on any of the stories that we're talking about today, whether it's those by-elections that are coming up or whether it's about how you have your Weetabix in the morning.
So many people have been writing in about the way in which they put their cereal in first or the milk in first. Do they whack it in the microwave or do they turn it into some sort of slushy porridge, which I find vile? Do get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.com.
But first, let's get a news bulletin with Rhiannon.
Thank you. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. House prices fell at the fastest annual rate in 12 years last month. Halifax reports the average UK property price was down 2.6% in June compared with the same month last year. That's more than double the drop in May, marking the largest fall since 2011. The mortgage provider says the average house price for June was around £286,000. Energy giant Shell says its gas profits are significantly lower in the second quarter of the year. The oil and gas firm says trading has been impacted by seasonal shifts in the market in the first 3 months. It also expects an adjusted loss of between $600 and $800 million for the quarter. The Deputy General Secretary of the National Education Union says it will be a real failure for the government if all 4 teaching unions vote to strike together.
Education is a right. That is why we have to fight.
It comes as teachers across England walk out for a second day in the latest wave of strike action over pay. Members of the union warn there could be more strikes in the autumn term. The government offered a one-off £1,000 payment for the year, as well as a 4.5% pay rise for next year. All 4 education unions rejected the offer. A science teacher on the picket line today told us he'd like a pay rise in line with inflation.
We feel that our pay has been cut significantly as a result of stagnating wages for education and rising inflation, and we feel that this government hasn't been willing to do enough to support education. And we know that so many new teachers are leaving the profession so early. It's unsustainable. The wages are not meeting the work that they're being asked to put in, and it's driving people out of the system, and that's really bad for students.
Radiographers who carry out scans on patients will stage a 48-hour strike later this month over pay. The walkout will take place from 8 a.m. on the 25th of July. The Society of Radiographers says its members at 43 NHS trusts will take part in the strike action. The announcement comes after union members voted to reject the government's pay offer of 5% plus a non-consolidated lump sum. The police are failing the public too often. That's according to a new report. His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services says there are still significant shortcomings in key areas. That's despite progress being made in recording crime. The report says some of the issues include skills shortages and long call delays. Inquests are to open into the deaths of 2 university students and a school caretaker killed in an attack in Nottingham. Grace O'Malley Kumar and Barnaby Webber, both 19, along with 65-year-old Ian Coates, died in a knife attack in the early hours of June the 13th. 31-year-old Valdo Calocane is charged with their murder as well as attempted murder for an alleged van attack on pedestrians. Meanwhile, inquests into the deaths of 4 boys who died after falling through ice on a frozen lake will also be heard today. Brothers 6-year-old Samuel and 8-year-old Finley Butler died, along with their 11-year-old cousin Thomas Stewart and 10-year-old Jack Johnson. They were pulled from Babs Mill Lake in Kinghurst in December last year, but later died in hospital. An initial inquest was told 3 of the boys were rescued after 22 minutes in the icy water, while the 4th was rescued after half an hour. 3 men have been charged in court with terrorism offences linked to the attempted murder of a police officer in Northern Ireland. The men aged 23, 25 and 36 have been charged with possessing articles for use in terrorism. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell was shot multiple times in front of his son at a sports complex in Omagh in February. He spent several weeks in intensive care. MPs have criticised the government's handling of the HS2 Euston Station project in London. In a report by the Public Accounts Committee, the government's accused of lacking clarity in its objectives despite 8 years of planning. The project's experienced delays, and HS2 trains are now not expected to run into Euston until 2041. The government says it remains committed to delivering the project. And Twitter is threatening to sue Mark Zuckerberg after claiming Meta's new app Threads is a copycat of Twitter. Twitter's lawyers allege Meta has unlawfully misappropriated its trade secrets and intellectual property. It also accuses Meta of hiring former Twitter employees with access to confidential information. Meta denies the claims and says that no Threads team members are former Twitter employees. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back over to Tom and Ellie.
Well, a very good morning to you and welcome to Britain's Newsroom with me, Tom Harwood, and Ellie Costello. It's Friday the 7th of July and it's just gone 7 minutes past 10. And I've got to say, a lot of people have been getting in touch. Some about the big issues, some about the trivial issues that we love so much.
Yeah, I mean, lots of you getting in touch on the Don't Kill Cash campaign this morning, which is incredible. So GB News launched this on Monday. Already, 163,000 of you have signed that petition. It's amazing. Isn't it? Lots of you getting in touch. David in Hampshire says, although we do use cards, we never put tips on a card. If you do, you're giving the banks a percentage of that tip. So tips should be in cash.
Also, if you give a cash tip, sometimes these tips have to be shared around with all of the different waiters and all the rest of it. I much prefer if you've had great service from someone, you want to give them a bit extra, they should take that for themselves, shouldn't they?
I know, I always think that as well. You know, when I was a waitress, that used to happen a lot. People would say, we want to give a tip only
specifically
to... Yeah, but there were strict rules about that.
Well, Philip has written in, imagine pocket money becoming pocket cards.
It's not the same.
It's not... I think there's something tangible, physical money, being able to teach children about the value of money, about not flitting money away, about saving, all the rest of it. I think it's very important.
I think there's a lot to be said about that, because I think if something's on a card, you don't see it really for what it is, which is valuable. Whereas if you have cash in your hand, you can literally see it depleting. And I think there's a lot for...
Sometimes depleting faster than other times.
Well, yeah, if there's anything near me in a shop.
But there are other issues that people have been writing in about as well, because the big question that we've been asking is it cereal first or milk first? This is all because Weetabix seem to have, in my view, put out a sacrilegious social media post saying that you should put your milk in before you put your Weetabix in. But lots of people have been getting in, getting in touch, and absolutely. So, Ellie, you said you put in...
So my way of doing it is a little bit different. So I do Weetabix first, milk in the microwave, sprinkle of sugar, stunning. It's like a nice, soggy, warm bowl of joy.
And I just can't stand soggy, warm bowls of...
You like a hard biscuit.
Well, Julie agrees with you. Julie has said, I'm with Ellie, about 300 millilitres of milk in a jug, pop it in the microwave for 2 minutes.
That's hot.
And then pour it over your bowl of Weetabix. Oh, so the milk is heated, but the Weetabix isn't.
That's a good way of doing it, Julie. But she also has sugar, so you and I, we should have breakfast together. She says it's glorious, and it is. Yeah.
Dave of Braintree, however, has written in, and I assume this is about cereal, but it could be about anything. He said, Tom is correct in every respect. And so, Dave, that's my favourite comment this morning.
Stop.
I don't think we need to hear any more.
You're going to make his head really big.
We've settled all of these different debates.
Now, this is different from Ivor, who says, I like Weetabix buttered with lemon curd for breakfast, then put hot milk over the top.
That's a bit much, Ivor.
Like a lemony, biscuity...
A lemony, biscuity, milky... blancmange.
Blancmange, yeah. Would you like a blancmange?
Yeah, just too many different things all at once. Well, anyway, keep your views coming at that. Let's get to some real news as well this morning, because Rishi Sunak is facing more and more pressure. This is as the Tory party is likely to be hit with yet another by-election.
Yes, this comes after MP Chris Pincher is now facing an 8 weeks common suspension as an inquiry found that he had groped 2 men at a club in London last year.
Well, let's talk to Christian Calvi, the senior political correspondent at the Daily Express. Christian, thank you for being with us this morning. It's a big political story, of course. But before we get on to the politics, how do you have your breakfast in the morning?
I haven't eaten breakfast for many years, Tom. I get out of bed. The news is my breakfast. That's what I say. That's what I say.
Good answer. Good answer.
That's why I've gained so much weight over the last 2 years.
Too much news. Well, let's get to this particular problem for Rishi Sunak, because there are 3 by-elections occurring on the 20th of this month, and now we're expecting 2 more, perhaps in the autumn. This is not the in tray that the Prime Minister wants to see.
No, and it's disastrous both on paper in terms of Commons votes, because the Tory party is very divided. So notionally, when Boris won an 80-seat majority, people said, oh, well, you know, you've got to then get 40 MPs to rebel. But actually, that wasn't very difficult, because even under Boris, the Tory party was very split between free marketeers and, you know, One Nation Conservatives and all the rest. And that has splintered even more under Rishi Sunak. So rebellions and defeats are becoming increasingly likely. But then you've also got the very important issue of party morale. And I've been speaking to a lot of MPs over the last 2 weeks at many of the summer receptions that we've seen, and they are very depressed. And the continuous loss of seats with massive majorities, you know, almost all the seats that are going up for by-election over the next few months have 20-odd thousand majorities, with the exception of Boris's seat in Uxbridge, and they're almost certain to lose them. So, and they're in all parts of the country. You've got the Northwest with Tamworth and Chris Pincher. You've got the Yorkshire with Selby. You've got down in Somerset with David Warburton. They're all across the country. They're all looking like defeats, and this is a nightmare both for MP morale and party activist morale.
And what about morale of the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, who promised a government of integrity? And when we're talking about Chris Pincher, we are reminded, aren't we, of the Tory sleaze time. And it makes it all too easy, doesn't it, for those negative headlines and those easy attack lines from other parties?
It does. It's quite a squalid affair. And, you know, people saying, is he going to resign before the by-election? Is he going to, you know, just run off or stay for as long as he can? I don't think he's going to discover a sense of shame anytime soon. And you've got to remember, if there's a 2-month recall petition, that's quite a lot of salary given an £80,000 annual income. But to be fair to Rishi Sunak, this did happen at the end of Boris's era. The whip was withdrawn, and there is no mechanism, despite what Labour have attacked Rishi Sunak for, there's no mechanism for them to kick him out of Parliament. They did as much as they could do without Chris Pincher himself making a decision to resign. And that is fair criticism of the system, if you like.
Well, is it a fair criticism of the system? Because Parliament isn't a normal employer. People are sent there by their constituents. Surely the only way people should be removed from Parliament isn't by some committee, isn't by some formal process. It's by a recall petition, which is happening, and then a vote of constituents. Surely, if the only way you get in there is by a vote of your constituents, the only democratic way that people should be removed is through a vote of their constituents as well.
No, I mean, I do agree with you, and I say people can argue. People do argue, and we see quite a lot of moves within the debate around propriety and ethics in politics and in government to hand over control to some, sort of dedicated bureaucrat, some top civil servant to adjudicate on ministerial propriety or a standards or privileges committee. And I feel deeply uncomfortable with that. I think what that does is it takes the voice of the 70,000 or so electors in ex-members' constituency and gives the power to a small number of MPs, or even worse, an unelected civil servant, to make that decision for them. So I think the mechanism at the moment is broadly right. For what it's worth, I think that the current recall petition way about doing things, where it's a limit of 10 days, isn't it? A suspension. 10 days is a very low limit for a suspension when you're getting 50 odd days for Chris Pincher, 90 days for Boris Johnson. Actually, I think there's an argument to make that ceiling slightly higher. So you've got more options for suspension without then threatening a by-election in almost every case.
Or perhaps just a different way to call about these recall petitions. Of course, the original recall bill put forward by Zach Goldsmith back when he was an MP in the early 2010s didn't want a committee of MPs to decide this. It should be sort of more organic from the people saying we want to recall this MP. Perhaps that's something to look at again.
Yes, ironically, Zach Goldsmith put forward a recall petition and then had a by-election over Heathrow and ended up losing to the Lib Dems. So it didn't all go entirely well for him. I mean, I also disagree with that proposal, because I think what that then leads to, unless you've got an incredibly high bar, 60, 70% of constituents wanting a by-election, then you're going to end up in a situation where any MP who takes any unpopular, controversial decision could be threatened with a by-election. And you and I know how, especially on things like housing, on development, on infrastructure, you can get very large minorities of groups that put pressure on MPs. And I think anything to decrease the level of freedom that they have to make independent decisions. We've got elections. They're every 5 years. I know in this country we get very impatient, and the Lib Dems call for a general election every other week, and Labour too. 5 years is a very consistent period to have elections. So I just say, everyone calm down. If an MP's messed up, their constituents will have the right to get rid of them in 2-3 years' time. In the meantime, let MPs get on with doing the job in the way they see fit, and leave democracy alone.
OK, Christian Calgi, really good to see you this morning. Thank you very much for your company.
It was interesting that Christian Calgi there was mentioning how housing could be one of these issues whereby people would put forward a recall petition, because this is, by luck, our very next subject. Indeed, UK house prices fell at their fastest annual pace since June 2011 last month. Now, that might sound slightly surprising to people who are in the property market at the moment, but year on year, the average price of a home sold in June fell by 2.6%. But if we look at that in the round, if we move on a little bit, we can compare that to previous years where actually the price rises have been really rather big.
Well, Britain has suffered some of the worst house price falls when compared to other major European economies. Understandably, soaring interest rates and persistent inflation are potentially deterring British buyers. But why are we experiencing such a drop compared to those other major EU economies?
Well, one man who definitely has an answer to this is Freddie Poser. He's the director of Priced Out UK. And Freddie, I think a lot of people will be raising an eyebrow at these figures that say prices are falling, because to many people it doesn't feel like that.
Absolutely. I think what's key to get right is that prices are falling, the headline value of the home is falling. That doesn't mean these houses are getting any more affordable, that it's easier to buy. If your interest rate, we're now seeing that 2-year fixes are well above 6% across the UK. If that's gone up from maybe 2-3% as the average market rate, then your mortgage repayment is actually much higher, even though the sticker price has come down a bit from the very peaks. It's still a long way up where it was even just 5 or 6 years ago, but we're not seeing houses get more affordable.
And is this... So 2.6% as a fall that we've seen in the UK, that's more than in other European countries. Might that be explained because we had a higher increase in previous years as well. So I think it was double-digit increases after COVID of house prices. That going down by just 2.6%. On aggregate, it's still a lot higher, perhaps.
I think that's probably right. I think there are lots of different factors about the British housing market. I think part of that is we've got these really highly overvalued homes, depending on where you sit, and that exposes it a lot. That if the demand suddenly falls a bit, that could be really exposed then with this sticker price. But houses there's no cause to celebrate because it doesn't make it easier for first-time buyers to get on the housing ladder. In fact, what we're seeing is first-time buyers, people who have to buy with a mortgage, withdrawing, unable to pay, and the prices have to come down.
What's your prediction about what happens next, Freddie? Because do you think we will see house prices continue to come down? I know it's always very difficult to make a guess at these things, but with interest rates, as you say, it's going to be so much harder for people to get mortgages if they haven't already got one, or indeed when they have to refix. It's becoming very difficult for people, isn't it?
I think, I try never to make predictions, but I think that's probably right. The market seems to think that the bank's base rate will hit about 6% in the medium term, which means we'll see mortgage rates go higher than 6%. They're always a bit above that base rate. So if we start to see mortgage rates of 7.5%, I think we can expect to see demand shrink a bit. But I don't think we're going to see a sort of 2008 style cratering, and we're certainly not going to see a massive long-term correction. The British housing market, unfortunately, because we're not building more homes, house prices in the long run, I think this will round out to being still on the up.
And I did just want to ask you, because we were discussing this a little bit earlier on this week. I mean, people always make references, don't they, to the 80s and 90s when interest rates were 12, 14, 15%. And they're saying, it's not too bad for you now at 6%. It's not quite the same, is it? Because we are a lot more indebted in those houses that we're living in.
Absolutely. It's all about sort of loan to value ratios and then your payments to your income. And what we've seen is that people are having to borrow far more than as a multiple of their income, up to 10, 11 times sometimes in the southeast, when back in the 80s, even though the interest rate was higher, the money was more expensive, you were borrowing less of it, and that
So it's a lot more affordable on a loan of £90,000 to pay a 15% interest rate than on a loan of £500,000 to pay a 6% interest rate.
Absolutely. If you're borrowing more, a percentage of that is even more, and we're seeing that the difference doesn't nearly make up for the slightly lower interest rates now.
OK, Freddie Poser, really good to see you this morning. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Well, still to come, are these cheap package holidays that we all love so much causing an increase in skin cancer for happy holiday makers? Well, find out more after this.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Rain or showers for some of us today, but dry and bright for many, and it is going to feel warmer. We've got low pressure to the west of the UK, drawing up this hotter air from the near continent, and temperatures really significantly higher in places compared with July so far. But we have got some rain to talk about first of all. Scotland and Northern Ireland seeing those outbreaks of rain turn more to showers by the afternoon, and those showers will be heavy in places, particularly Western Scotland and Northern Ireland. But also the odd rumble of thunder. And for England and Wales, sunnier skies with rising temperatures, mid to high 20s widely, perhaps even 30 Celsius towards the southeast. Any cloud and showers in the north, though, clears away during the evening. And then clear spells for many for a time, with this southerly breeze drawing up warm air, so a muggy night to come. However, towards the southwest, we've got an area of cloud and some showers moving into Cornwall and Devon by the end of the night. 18 or 19 Celsius in the south, 15, 16 in the north, so a muggy night for sleeping, but plenty of sunshine for many as we begin the weekend, particularly towards the east. Towards the west, we've got these areas of cloud moving through, and during the morning, the chance of some showers for Wales, southwest England, moving into the Midlands, northern England, and the possibility of thundery rain, some intense downpours. However, ahead of that, we keep the heat. 32 Celsius are possible at high temperature in the southeast, fresher further west.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome back. It's just coming up to 10:28. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Tom Howard and me, Ellie Costello.
Now, the number of people in the UK diagnosed with skin cancer has hit a record high, with a sharp rise amongst those particularly over the age of 55.
Yes, melanoma cases across all age groups have reached 17,500 a year in the UK, the highest since records began. That's according to Cancer Research UK.
So a boom in cheap package holidays in the 1960s has been linked to this rise in this serious type of skin cancer among particularly older adults. That's what Cancer Research UK has been suggesting. But let's get more on this with the oncologist and former chief of the WHO's cancer programme, Professor Carol Sikora. Professor, thank you so much for being with us this morning. This is a big concern for people. I mean, is there this direct link that Cancer Research has been suggesting between package holidays, many more people going to sunnier climes in the last few decades, and this increase particularly for older people?
It is. Melanoma is a dangerous cancer to have because it spreads. Curable if it's localized, so picking up quickly is great. It's black spot space. Melanoma just means black in Latin. And what happened in the 50s and 60s, package holidays came in. Instead of Bournemouth, Eastbourne, Felixstowe and so on, people stopped going to the British seaside. They went to Spain. It was half the price. And when they went, they became lobsters. They sat on the beach and went red. And that's the most dangerous way of trying to get a suntan. And that is linked to melanoma. And this data produced by Cancer Research UK really validates the fact that you should be careful about the sun.
Yeah, I mean, we do have to be really, really careful when we go on holiday, especially where the sun is a lot stronger. But I mean, I think what also feeds into this is beauty standards and this desire to be tanned all year round. And certainly in this country, it's a lot of sunbeds use as well, isn't it? And that will be directly linked to melanoma. Is there a safe number of sunbed usages that someone can do, or are sunbeds unsafe? Do they lead to melanoma?
I think those people that go and have, the total tan and really keep going back to have it every week to keep the tan up to speed, that's the dangerous thing. There's no safe dose of sunlight. That's the trouble. And everybody's individual. My wife, for example, has a disorder in her DNA repair mechanism, which means that she gets these little spots when she goes in the sun. It's called actinic keratosis. And it is a precancer, so we check her regularly. And a lot of people have that. So individual sensitivity is important. So one person may be able to lie and become a lobster, another person can't. And I think the interesting thing about the current data, it really does tie into the time period in the 60s when package holidays started. And for the first time, it was cheaper to go abroad in a plane than it was to go to the British seaside. And that meant lots of people went there. And these people are now in the 50s and 60s, and they're the ones which have the increase in melanoma. So it really is pretty conclusive that it was something that changed in the 60s that led to the events that we're seeing now with the rise in cancer.
Do we take this all too lightly? I know I've been abroad, and when someone gets a big red suntan, everyone sort of laughs about it, and oh, you've been out for too long, you stayed. I mean, should we take this more seriously? Should we perhaps be absolutely avoiding these things and perhaps chastise those who sort of fall asleep in the sun?
No, I think it's okay in moderation, and to keep something on, just a loose vest or sort of clothing, a T-shirt, for example. Even if you go swimming, keep the T-shirt on. And there's no doubt that the sun is a dangerous thing, and a combination with sea and wind, it damages the skin, as do the sunbeds. And it's the repetition of the damage that causes the problem. And we don't really understand the complete link in melanoma. Other cancers of the skin are quite harmless because they can be removed very easily and they don't spread. But melanoma can spread. It's still curable. 85% of patients with melanoma will be cured of their disease because it's excised locally. And we've got better treatments now, immunotherapy, drugs that work for melanoma. But the best thing is prevention, and that means putting sun cream on, keeping a T-shirt on, and avoiding just sitting there and going to sleep after a six-pack of lager and lying there in the sun. That's the problem.
Professor Sikora, you're just describing my holidays. I don't know how you've got this insight.
Thank you very much, Professor Carol Sikora. Really good to see you this morning. It's such an important message. Prevention is key. You've got to wear your factor 50, Tom.
Everything in moderation.
No,
Everything in moderation.
Fake it till you make it. That's what I say. This is fake.
Fake tan.
Always.
Do you know what I've started doing?
Always.
I now have a moisturiser that on every morning that has SPF in it. So I am wearing sun cream on my face right now.
Very
Just it's
good.
someone who I know who's a little bit older but has a very young face told me just wear sun cream every day.
If I can tell you anything, Tom, it's skincare. Anyway, we'll get into that. Still to come, is Ben Stokes' team facing an uphill battle in this week's Ashes? We'll be live from Yorkshire with the latest. That's after your morning news with Rhiannon.
Thank you. Good morning. It's 10:34. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. A woman continues to be questioned today over a car crash at a school in London which killed an 8-year-old girl. 16 people needed treatment after a Land Rover crashed into the study prep school in Wimbledon. The woman in her 40s remains in custody. She was arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. Energy giant Shell says its gas profits are significantly lower in the second quarter of this year. The oil and gas firm says trading's been impacted by seasonal shifts in the market in the first 3 months. It also expects an adjusted loss of between $600 and $800 million for the quarter. The Deputy General Secretary of the National Education Union says it will be a real failure for the government if all 4 teaching unions vote to strike together. It comes as teachers across England walk out for a second day in the latest wave of strike action over pay. Members of the union warn there could be more strikes in the autumn term. The police are failing the public too often, according to a new report. His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services says there are still significant shortcomings in key areas. That's despite progress being made in recording crime. The report says some of the issues include skills shortages and long call delays. And house prices fell at the fastest annual rate in 12 years last month. Halifax reports the average UK property price was down 2.6% in June compared with the same month last year. That's more than double the drop in May, marking the largest fall since 2011. The mortgage provider says the average house price for June was around £286,000. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2739 and €1.1705. The price of gold is £1,504.06 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,265 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
If it matters to you,
welcome back. It's 10:40. You're watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Tom Howard and me, Ellie Costello.
Well, after a gripping first day of the third Ashes test, England is resuming its 195 runs behind Australia this morning.
Well, we're joined now by Anna Riley, who'll talk us through the build-up and Just Stop Oil's plans to disrupt play. Oh, no, we hope not. Good morning to you, Anna. How are things looking there? Do you think there's going to be some disruption?
Good morning. Yes, England resume on 68-3. A lot of excitement here ahead of the game that's starting at 11 o'clock. You may be able to see behind me, or if you're listening on radio here at Headingley Station, the crowds are pouring in. Tickets have sold out for day 2 of this third Ashes test, which is absolutely crucial for England to win. It's currently 2-0. They need to win this third test to remain in with the chance of winning the Ashes overall. It was exciting gameplay. I was here yesterday. There was a lot of support for Wood and his bowling, and they're hoping to keep up that atmosphere here today. In terms of security being put in place, yes, Just Stop Oil, obviously, earlier in the week they stormed Wimbledon, didn't they? Came on to a match there using jigsaw and confetti. Also last week at the Lords as well during the Ashes. Johnny Bairstow, actually one of the England cricketers, carried off a protester to try and resume play. So there has been security ramped up here. The Yorkshire County Cricket Club have been working closely with West Yorkshire Police to make sure people don't storm the pitch, and there's been an increased security as well. I can see that people have been walking in. There's been a lot of bag searches to check what people are bringing in, and there's also been sniffer dogs as well to check what people are bringing in. So hopefully not. Hopefully it won't be disturbed. I've been speaking to people here this morning, and they say they would be very disappointed if the game was to be disturbed by Just Stop Oil protesters. They say, some of them say they can understand, they've maybe got a point they want to make, but they don't think doing it at sporting events is the right way to do it. So we will be on the lookout for anything happening today, but fingers crossed not, fingers crossed it's a nice peaceful game that everybody can enjoy without disruption.
Yeah, fingers crossed, Anna Riley. It would be nice to just focus on the sport, wouldn't it? And the weather looks wonderful there, so enjoy. Looks great, doesn't it? Everyone in their shorts.
Oh, I know. I'm very jealous. I'm not in shorts at all. Perhaps.
You wanted to come in without your jacket today.
I did. Well, I just thought it's going to be touching 30 degrees.
Yeah,
so I mean,
he wanted to come casual.
Luckily, I think we've got some aircon in this studio, so that's always
nice and cool.
Yes. But now let's have a look at what's been going on in the wider news. We're going to review not just the papers, but some other stories as well. Delighted to be joined by the writer and commentator Candice Holsworth and the former special advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley, to take us through some of these headlines this morning.
Yes, and let's have a look at those headlines, shall we? Because the Times leads with flight disruption, which could affect a third of European holidays. Now, traffic controllers are threatening to strike.
And the Daily Mirror leads with the horrific crash which killed one girl and injured 16 other people yesterday in Wimbledon after this Land Rover crashed into a school.
The Guardian says ministers have been ordered to hand over messages from the former Prime Minister to the COVID inquiry after losing a legal challenge.
And The Telegraph says that the Archbishop thinks universities should face funding cuts for not supporting minorities.
The Daily Mail shows the vehicle which crashed yesterday into a school in Wimbledon, killing a girl aged 8 and injuring 16 other people.
And the newspaper talks about the Home Office as well, but we'll maybe get to that a little bit later. Let's kick off with some of these stories, because, Candice, there's one really interesting story that you've picked up from The Express, and it's a foreign story. What's going on here?
So this story in The Express is about Prigozhin. So he's the leader of the Wagner Group. He led this uprising, this march on Moscow, now supposedly exiled to Belarus. And it's all about his St. Petersburg palace. So if you go inside it, it is exactly what you'd imagine from Prigozhin, just lots of weird stuff. So wigs, sunglasses, gold bars, stuffed alligators. I mean, this guy, I don't think character quite describes him. And he went from like a hot dog salesman to a convict to leading some mercenary group and now living in a St. Petersburg palace. I mean...
So people watching on television can see some of these peculiar wigs on screen. The guy looks like Borat when he's dressed up like this. I mean, why has he been doing this?
Who knows? I mean, he has so many different identities. I think occupying the position he has in Putin's Russia, I mean, you would have to hide yourself. I mean, moving around Moscow, and there's probably people out to get him all the time. Some people don't even believe he's in Belarus. I mean, the story in The Express thinks he could be in hiding somewhere else. Who knows? Very dodgy. You don't get a straight story out of these guys, you know?
So mysterious. I just love the fact that he was literally the catering manager for Mr. Putin. Somehow got in close to Putin in this weird sort of regal court he runs in Moscow. And just through that, became super rich, started his own private army, and almost overthrew the Russian regime just a couple of weeks ago.
But this is the post-Soviet story, right? I mean, even Putin himself, apparently he was a middling KGB officer. No one thought that he would become what he did, but in that total chaos and collapse, all sorts of unusual characters rose to the top.
Oh, well...
I think the other thing to say is, because I think we don't know, Candy's absolutely right, we don't know whether he's still in Belarus. I think he might have moved back to Russia, and this is an attempt, I think, by the Kremlin to sort of discredit this man, to think, do you really want this guy that looks like he could be Peter one day or the next Patricia? Who knows? Because of all these wigs and facial goings on there.
Because we think it's the Russian regime that's put out these photos almost to humiliate him.
Exactly so, because there's fear throughout the Kremlin that he may stage a comeback, and if there's another mutiny, that's the last thing that Vladimir Putin wants in his intro.
Charlie, let's stick with you, shall we? And this is the front page of The Times, and it's up to a third of European flights are at risk of being delayed or cancelled this summer. Why?
Well, more misery for holiday makers over this summer. You were just talking about wearing sun cream, I think, over the holiday season, and you might not need it at all if you can't get a flight, because absolutely right. It's European flights operated by Eurocontrol, which is the European Control Centre that deals with European flights across the UK into Europe, as you'd expect. But with an increase in the number of flights, there's up to about 33,000 a day that they handle, which is about 10,000 more than what they otherwise would. Over the peak season, July, August and into September. So many people's holidays will be wrecked because of staffing, because of the rosters of pilots, and because of pay. So we'll just have to wait and see in a few days' time whether UK holidaymakers get their flight on.
One person whose holiday might be a little bit disrupted, actually, is our very own Ellie Costello. You're flying this evening.
Well, I'd like to, yeah. My flight's delayed. When was the last time that anyone actually had a flight that was on time? I'd love to know.
It's such an essential job as well. I mean, these guys, they're like the unsung heroes of 9/11, when they grounded all those thousands of flights safely without an incident. And you forget, these are the people that keep order.
Have you seen the musical Come From Away?
It's fantastic.
It
Very
is
much
incredible.
recommend.
It is. So the US closed its airspace for the first time in history. Hundreds of flights had to be rejigged, and where do they land? They land in this tiny Canadian town, which had a population of only a handful of people, and suddenly for a week, while these people are stuck in the middle of nowhere in Newfoundland, they have to sort of care for this new community, and it's weird. It's like an uplifting story about 9/11. It's so very interesting.
Yeah, it's like a light in the darkness.
Light in the darkness.
Light in the darkness.
Oh, how poetic.
We really recommend that one, don't we, Tom?
Other musicals are available.
Other musicals are available.
I'm slightly worried about the amount of product placement. Just no.
Yeah, we've been talking about Weetabix all morning.
Other cereals are available.
Yeah. It's quite important that we mention that one,
absolutely.
Right? But yes,
goodness me.
If you've got any prayers or thoughts for my flight later, do keep them coming, because I do really want to be on it, please. Air traffic control, please. OK, Candice, let's have a look at The Guardian, shall we? And this is Sir Keir Starmer. Let's have a chat about him.
Yeah, so apparently Keir Starmer is now sort of laying out his vision, because people generally see them as a government in waiting, and he said he's going to be laser-focused on poverty, like Blair. Interesting that he's mentioned Blair. Does he see himself in that image? Does he want to present himself in that image? He said one of the things he's going to focus on is opportunity for young people. And he brought up himself because he said he came from a very ordinary background, and through opportunities in education, he was able to rise to, being where he is now. He said he's going to focus, though, on teaching children to speak well. And another one is he isn't going to focus on science and tech, but on things that make you human, which a lot of people say, OK, this is really vague, and this is really Starmer. He's sort of saying these things, but it's not concrete. You can't really remember it. Teaching kids to speak well, not focusing on science and tech. But what? What are you going to do? We need very concrete proposals, and I think this is the one thing that Keir Starmer fails on. He's a bit woolly.
Now, Charlie, you advised Michael Gove, not when he was Education Secretary, but it's interesting, Starmer yesterday quoted Michael Gove. He was talking about the bigotry of low expectations, where people think that because someone comes from a certain background, they couldn't possibly achieve something. He was praising Michael Gove in that speech. That's an interesting tack.
Well, quite right, too. Look, no, there's a serious point, because I think, look, it is about poverty, and it's about, you know, the one way to get out of poverty, as everybody knows, is to get people into work. And we've got record low unemployment levels figures in this country. But I think it is about actually making sure that you've got that aspiration and that opportunity to achieve and move forward. And just as Candice was saying about sort of learning how to speak, it's an interesting one. It's not one that I actually buy into. I think because I'm all for ideas. I mean, I think the country's been bereft of ideas since sort of Brexit and COVID has sort of sucked up political ideology and political thinking. But I don't sort of agree that you could just sort of teach somebody to speak. You have those things already in place in English. I mean, I remember doing English classes. You know, everybody had to read a page and you move on to the next person. And you know, things like drama, you know, music, sport. These are all things that you can encourage communication skills, social abilities, to allow people the ability to communicate properly.
But speaking of confidence, communication skills, oratory, Sir Keir Starmer was interrupted by two of the young people standing behind him. Perhaps they had too much communication ability there. Candice, what exactly went on?
Yeah, so it's people saying that he mustn't U-turn on the whole Green New Deal, because, I mean, Starmer's always been seen as a red-green, you know, socialist and very big on green policies. But he's shape-shifted a lot, you know, especially now that people are sort of linking him to things like Just Stop Oil, who are very unpopular with the public. And he's slightly distancing himself a little bit and trying to present himself as a centrist. And people, these young people, don't want him to do that. And so that's why they disrupted it, because they're like, you've got to stay firm on these policies. But Starmer didn't quite commit to it. And I just find this so fascinating. You know, he wants to be a government in waiting, but what does he really stand for? Like, what does he stand for?
It was so awkward. They sort of stood there for about a minute before they were moved off. They were just sort of saying, stop U-turning, stop. And he was like, please let me finish, please let me finish. And in that slightly nasal voice that he has. It sounds a bit Milibandy, really.
Well, the only thing I was going to add is because I think, you know, look, we've seen a lot of Tory infighting over the last year, so I can sort of, you know, smell it like, you know, there's no tomorrow. It's wafting over from the Labour Party. Because there's clearly a division within the Labour Party, the far left, that are not very happy with Sir Keir Starmer's leadership. I think Wes Streeting was out on broadcast the other day to say that the left of the Labour Party needed to dry their eyes after, you know, on the back of Sir Keir Starmer's leadership because of the criticism he's facing. So there's clearly division within the Labour Party and the militant left as to how Keir Starmer should lead.
Is this not a row Starmer wants to have, though? He loves everyone saying, oh, look how centrist he is, because he knows that the last, however many elections there were, Peter Mandelson likes to say the last however many elections were for the Labour Party were lose, 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 Blair, 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 lose, 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 lose.
Yes.
And so they sort of feel like they need to get back into a more centrist position, otherwise there'll be another loss.
Yes, yeah. Starmer's no Blair. I mean, Blair, I mean, for whatever his criticisms, and I'm sure there are loads of people watching this who aren't a fan, he had a lot of charisma, and he did bring people on side, and he had vision. And I don't think Keir Starmer has that. Plus, I think many people in Labour are furious about the splits over Jeremy Corbyn. I don't think that's been resolved yet.
But you're absolutely right, Tom, because I think Sir Keir Starmer was obviously very critical of the Just Stop Oil folk and was saying that they should just stop. I think that's a Penny Mordaunt line that he took, but there we are. But he's absolutely right, because public opinion is clearly on the side of just stopping these crackpots.
Yes, I think he said yesterday, just stop oil.
Yeah.
So clearly leaning into that where he thinks public opinion is, and let's face it, where public opinion probably is.
OK, Charlie Rowley. And Candice Carsworth, really good to see you this morning. You're back in the next hour, aren't you?
Yes, we are.
Lots more stories to cover then. Thank you very much.
It's a very juicy news Friday.
It is,
We're very lucky on this
and
programme.
fun as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Now, in the next few moments, could the coming weeks deal the Prime Minister a mortal blow? Find out exactly what's going on here in the next hour with GB News, Britain's news channel.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Rain or showers for some of us today, but dry and bright for many, and it is going to feel warmer. We've got low pressure to the west of the UK, drawing up this Hotter air from the near continent and temperatures really significantly higher in places compared with July so far. But we have got some rain to talk about first of all. Scotland and Northern Ireland seeing those outbreaks of rain turn more to showers by the afternoon, and those showers will be heavy in places, particularly Western Scotland and Northern Ireland. But also the odd rumble of thunder. And for England and Wales, sunnier skies with rising temperatures, mid to high 20s widely, perhaps even 30 Celsius towards the southeast. Any cloud and showers in the north, though, clears away during the evening. And then clear spells for many for a time, with this southerly breeze drawing up warm air, so a muggy night to come. However, towards the southwest, we've got an area of cloud and some showers moving into Cornwall and Devon by the end of the night. 18 or 19 Celsius in the south, 15, 16 in the north, so a muggy night for sleeping, but plenty of sunshine for many as we begin the weekend, particularly towards the east. Towards the west, we've got these areas of cloud moving through, and during the morning, the chance of some showers for Wales, southwest England, moving into the Midlands, northern England, and the possibility of thundery rain, some intense downpours. However, ahead of that, we keep the heat. 32 Celsius are possible at high temperature in the southeast, fresher further west.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's 11 a.m. on Friday the 7th of July and you're watching Britain's Newsroom here on GB News with me, Tom Harwood, and Ellie Costello.
Coming up on the programme today, Rishi Sunak is facing more pressure as the Conservative Party is likely to be hit with yet another by-election, taking the upcoming total to 5.
And it's the battle of the billionaires as Elon Musk threatens to sue Mark Zuckerberg with the launch of his Twitter rival, Threads.
And new research suggests summer is the best time to try for a baby. We'll be speaking to a leading scientist.
We've also been loving getting your thoughts, opinions, views in gbviews@gbnews.com. We've had sort of two big elements of discussion this morning. Firstly, about cereal. Does the milk go in first or the cereal go in second? But there's something else as well.
We're talking baby names because Meghan Trainor, the US pop star, she called her baby Barry. Now, we haven't heard the name Barry in a little while, have we?
Baby Barry. It seems a little bit odd at the moment, perhaps. I don't know.
But are those vintage baby names making a comeback? Apparently they are. Names like Patricia. What were we reading earlier?
Esther, Gloria. I was saying perhaps there's a GB News influence here. Maybe not.
Let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.com. But first, let's get a news bulletin with Rhiannon.
Good morning. It's coming up to 2 minutes past 11. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. A woman continues to be questioned today over a car crash at a school in London which killed an 8-year-old girl. 16 people needed treatment after a Land Rover crashed into the study prep school in Wimbledon. The woman in her 40s remains in custody. She was arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. Teachers across England are walking out in the latest wave of strike action over pay. Members of the National Education Union are taking part in industrial action and warn there could be more strikes in the autumn term. The government offered a one-off £1,000 payment for this year, as well as a 4.5% pay rise for next year. All 4 education unions rejected the offer. The NEU's Deputy General Secretary, Niamh Sweeney, says the government needs to start negotiating.
Gillian Keegan hasn't negotiated with us since Easter. She said she would leave it to the independent review body. Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, said that the door was always open. Now, they've had the independent review body report for the last month. They haven't published it and they haven't got back round the table to negotiate with us. So let's do that. Let's see what the report said. They said that they would honour that. If it is the 6.5% that we believe that it is.
Travellers arriving in Dover for cross-channel ferries face long queues today. Delays in processing passengers are being blamed on French border officials carrying out extra checks. The wait time for cars is currently 1.5 hours, and for coaches, it's 2. Passengers were stuck in traffic for more than 10 hours at the start of the Easter holiday period. Radiographers who carry out scans on patients will stage a 48-hour strike later this month over pay. The walkout will take place from 8 a.m. on the 25th of this month. The Society of Radiographers says its members at 43 NHS trusts will take part in the strike action. The announcement comes after union members voted to reject the government's pay offer of 5% plus a non-consolidated lump sum. House prices fell at the fastest annual rate in 12 years last month. Halifax reports the average UK property price was down 2.6% in June compared with the same month last year. That's more than double the drop in May, marking the largest fall since 2011. The mortgage provider says the average house price for June was around £286,000. Energy giant Shell says its gas profits are significantly lower in the second quarter of the year. The oil and gas firm says trading's been impacted by seasonal shifts in the market in the first 3 months. It also expects an adjusted loss of between $600 and $800 million for the quarter. The police are failing the public too often. That's according to a new report. His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services says there are still significant shortcomings in key areas. That's despite progress being made in recording crime. The report says some of the issues include skills shortages and long call delays. Inquests are to open shortly into the deaths of 2 university students and a school caretaker killed in an attack in Nottingham. Grace O'Malley Kumar and Barnaby Webber, both 19, along with 65-year-old Ian Coates, died in a knife attack in the early hours of June the 13th. 31-year-old Valdo Calocane is charged with their murder, as well as attempted murder for an alleged van attack on pedestrians. And an inquest into the deaths of 4 boys who died after falling through ice on a frozen lake is due to end today. Brothers 6-year-old Samuel and 8-year-old Finley Butler died, along with their 11-year-old cousin Thomas Stewart and 10-year-old Jack Johnson. They were pulled from Babs Mill Lake in Kingshurst in December last year, but later died in hospital. An initial inquest was told 3 of the boys were rescued after 22 minutes in the icy water, while the 4th was rescued after half an hour. And MPs have criticised the government's handling of the HS2 Euston Station project in London. In a report by the Public Accounts Committee, the government's accused of lacking clarity in its objectives despite 8 years of planning. The project's experienced delays, and HS2 trains are now not expected to run into Euston until 2041. The government says it remains committed to delivering the project. And Twitter's threatening to sue Mark Zuckerberg after claiming Meta's new app, Threads, is a copycat of Twitter. Twitter's lawyers allege Meta has unlawfully misappropriated its trade secrets and intellectual property. It also accuses Meta of hiring former Twitter employees with access to confidential information. Meta denies the claims and says that no Threads team members are former Twitter employees. This is GB News. We're bringing more as it happens now, though. It's back over to Tom and Ellie.
Good morning and welcome to Britain's Newsroom with Tom Harwood and me, Ellie Costello. It's Friday the 7th of July, it's 11:07. Lots of you have been getting in touch this morning and we want your opinion on this one. This is about US pop star Meghan Trainor. She has just named her newborn baby Barry. Hashtag bring back Barry. And apparently this is a pattern. We are seeing these vintage names. We're going to call them vintage, not old-fashioned.
Yeah, absolutely.
They are coming back into fashion. Apparently Barbara, Martha, Rita, Patricia, all of these sorts of names are coming back into fashion. So we want to ask you that.
Yes, absolutely. Which vintage name would you like to bring back? Which names should we be seeing a resurgence in 2023, whatever year it is now? Yeah.
Or perhaps, what names have you heard recently that you thought might have gone extinct, but they haven't? Like Barry, for example.
Big questions there. But perhaps slightly bigger issues also at hand, because Rishi Sunak is facing more pressure as the Conservative Party is likely to be hit with yet another by-election. That's taking this total of 5 pending local votes.
Yes, the Tories are on shaky ground in all of these seats, but one, Boris Johnson's old seat of Uxbridge, has seen Labour in hot water too.
Yes, yesterday Sir Keir Starmer couldn't say whether he agreed with Sadiq Khan, who wants to roll out this ULEZ tax to Uxbridge, or the Uxbridge Labour candidate Danny Beales, who's now called for a pause in the rollout of this tax.
Yeah, it's a little bit complicated over in Uxbridge. So let's get more on this now with Andrew Boff, Conservative Chair of the London Assembly. Andrew, really good to see you this morning. So predicted losses for the Tories in these by-elections, but Uxbridge could be a bit more competitive than we first thought over this ULEZ issue.
Well, before we start, I just want to give a shout out to my cat, Barry.
Oh, Barry!
I'm sure he's watching at home.
And do you think he'll be happy that it's making a resurgence, his name?
I do hope so, and his brother Alfie is looking forward to that as well.
Oh, fantastic! Alfie is incredibly popular now.
Yeah, it is now popular. Yeah. Anyway, we're off this subject.
Great names, Andrew. Great names.
Should have brought me in early.
Yeah, we should.
Yes, Uxbridge, I think, is going to be an interesting case. I quizzed Sadiq Khan yesterday about whether or not the Labour candidate had actually asked him to delay the ULEZ, and he was uncertain as to whether or not he had been asked to. So it appears as though this backtrack by the Labour candidate is something just for leaflets rather than for any action on his part. So the ULEZ is a big issue in Outer London, and I suspect that the result in Uxbridge is going to surprise a lot of people, certainly on the doorstep. There's no love of Sadiq Khan.
But this is so interesting because there are seats all around the country, seats in the north, in Yorkshire, in the West Midlands, down in Somerset as well, that are all coming up for by-elections, where there are 20,000 Conservative majorities and the media is thinking these are all going to fall. But then Uxbridge, which has a majority of 7,000, less than half that of the other seats, is looking more competitive. Is it only about ULEZ?
You know, you've got to look at what by-elections actually are, and if you try to glean the results of the next general election by a by-election, then you're wasting your time, because they never, ever have really pointed to the outcome of the next general election. What they are is an opportunity for people to protest. Perhaps out in these other parts of the country, they may want to protest about the government. In London, they want to protest about what Sadiq Khan's doing. And he's realised that, not just because of the ULEZ. He's amazingly done a U-turn on the local police station, Uxbridge Police Station, which, curiously enough, I was at the opening of. I'm that old. But he's backtracked on that because he realises also that residents are concerned about crime, and here he goes and shuts the local police station. Well, he's backtracked on that. So they are worried. The Labour Party are desperately worried about the outcome in Uxbridge, because I think it's pointing towards a Conservative victory.
Well, it's a bold suggestion there. I wonder, this was, of course, Boris Johnson's seat. He resigned his seat in Parliament last month after it looked like he was going to be triggered towards a recall petition, perhaps a by-election. I mean, might he have held it if that actual recall petition had taken place?
Well, I don't know. Trying to predict what goes on in Boris's head is a futile pursuit. He may very well have done. He may very well have kept it if he'd stayed on. But what I'm quite convinced of is Steve Tuckwell, who is our candidate, will be an absolutely marvellous successor for. He's local, for one thing.
Interesting. Okay. Very, very interesting. Different factors in different seats, perhaps, across the country. Well, Andrew Boff, thank you very much for joining us here on Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
But let's move on to house prices now.
Yes. Because UK house prices fell at the fastest annual pace since June 2011 last month. Year on year, the average price of a home sold in June fell by 2.6%.
Yes, let's get some more on this now with Liam Halligan, who is, of course, our GB News business and economics editor.
Yep, and he's always...
Liam, what's going on here? House prices have come down a little bit, but they went up by a lot in the previous couple of years, so perhaps we're not better off.
Barry, what about Nigel, Roger and Alan? We need some Allans.
This is going to interrupt every single interview we do for this hour.
Until quite recently, Liam was actually the most popular boy's name, which is unbelievable in 2018,
I do like
2019.
The name, Liam.
It's a good name.
Because when I was a kid, there were hardly any Liams. I mean, there was Liam Brady when he was playing for Arsenal, but...
Liam Gallagher?
Yeah, but that was a bit later.
Oh, right.
Are you saying you're older than Liam Gallagher?
I'm about the same age, and actually we're from the same little hamlet in Ireland.
Really?
Yeah, a place called Cullion.
Very nice.
Between Charlestown and Swinford, County Mayo. People are from there too. We're probably related as well.
Well, talking about rare names, let's go to... I'm trying to make an awkward segue here to how rare houses are, because we're about 4 million behind equivalent countries in continental Europe. Not the best one I've ever done, no. But house prices have ticked down a little bit.
They have. Now, you know, ordinarily house prices are falling. Oh my God, that's absolutely terrible for Middle England and so on. But of course, for your generation, Ellie and Tom, you like the fact that house prices are falling because it means you might have more of a chance of buying a house. So let's have a look at this. So you get all kinds of house price indices from the estate agents, from Rightmove, from Purple Bricks and all the rest of it. But they tend to be offer prices, and offer prices often aren't met in reality. So when the likes of the Halifax, who actually base their house price indices on mortgages awarded, so deals that have actually been done, then you got to pin back your ears. So let's have a look at our graphic here. House prices, as you say, Ellie, they are down 2.6% on June 2022. That's the third successive monthly fall and the biggest fall since 2011. So that's that 12-year biggest fall. The typical UK home now costs $285,932. Though, Tom, you are thinking, if you are not saying, that wouldn't buy you, you know, a studio flat in the areas of London where you might want to live, right? Now, the average 2-year fixed rate mortgage, this is why house prices are going down, because just a couple of years ago, people were getting a 2-year fix for 1 or 2%. The average 2-year fix now is 6.54%. That's why house prices are coming down, because people can't afford to borrow enough money to fund bigger offers. So when the mortgage rates go up, people can afford to offer less, therefore house prices come down.
But we're talking about falling from an incredibly high historic level. I mean, we saw double-digit increases in house prices in the wake of COVID. This is not making up for that.
This is not making up for that. House prices go up a lot, and then occasionally when they go down a little bit, we jump up and down about it. So it's a kind of sore edge. There's a constant upward trend compared to earnings. You know, house prices have doubled in the last 15 years and earnings have gone up by like 25 or 30%. So there you see unaffordability reigns, locking, you know, your generation out of home ownership. 25 to 34-year-olds, 62% of them owned their own home in the early 90s. It's now less than 30%. So more than half of a whole generation at childbearing age, family forming age, household forming age are locked out of home ownership.
And that's so important. People, I think everyone wants to be able to form families, have spare bedrooms, have children, like sort of create that sort of basis for the unit of society, and we're not being able to do that.
This is messing with our demography. When I wrote a book on this a couple of years ago, I managed to pull together this calculation that back in the early 90s, average childbearing age, like first kid, right, was 28 years old. So a mum was 28-year-old on average when she had her first kid. That was in the 1990s. And at that point, that share of 28-year-olds, only 10% were in rented accommodation, right? Wow. The average age has gone up 1 year to 29% with mums having their first kids. And 40% of that cohort are now in rented accommodation. And
so that's almost a halving of the level that are in houses that they own.
That's right. So you've now got a situation where so many young people I know in the GB Newsroom, so many young people I know who are, you know, friends with my kids who are in their early 20s, so many people who write to me, stop me on the street. Youngsters just can't afford to buy homes, even if they're in professional jobs, even if there are two of them getting together. It's really, really tough. And that's the main reason, I'm afraid, why your generation, Tom and Ellie, are going to be the first for hundreds of years that are less well off than their parents.
Well, on that happy note
to end
at least
on,
I'm being honest.
No, absolutely no.
Right.
Really...
Always on the money, Liam Halligan. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's a nice depressing thought, Tom. We'll never own our own homes. Well, maybe we will, but there'll be a box.
Happy days here. Yeah, no, we always bring you the cheery news. Well, housing and climate campaigners across the country will be gathering tomorrow for what they're describing is a national day of action to highlight their cause, the cause that a broken system in the UK is linked to a deepening climate crisis. So this is sort of the Extinction Rebellion people teaming up with people who care about housing and doing a sort of joint event tomorrow.
Well, joining us to discuss this now is Kaz Ray. Good morning to you, Kaz. Really good to see you. So this day of action tomorrow, you are trying to highlight that the broken housing system in the UK is linked to the climate crisis. Tell us a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, these are intrinsically linked. We are seeing social schemes and housings being demolished rather than retrofitted. We're seeing lots of social cleansing going on. and the private rental markets are just not affordable for people to live in. Where overdevelopment of green spaces and complete destruction of green spaces during these demolition and new builds is absolutely stripping our communities and having a serious adverse impact on our environments.
Is it not the case that new builds are much better for the environment than leaky old Victorian housing stock? One of the reasons why we have such high energy bills in the UK is our housing stock is one of the oldest in Europe. It's not insulated as well, it's very expensive to heat, it's leaky. Wouldn't building new houses be better for the environment in that way?
Well, the UK has some of the most poorly insulated housing in Europe. You're absolutely right about that. But retrofitting is the greener, cheaper option, and it's less impact and less pollution put into the environment, and less disturbing for the green spaces. So, in retrospect, the retrofit is the cleaner, healthier, longer-term option. The continual building and pollutions that brings for the number of years that it happens in the demolition sites, the recycling, is far more damaging to the environment than actually retrofitting and saving the structures and rebuilding more energy-efficient homes from there, which would then in turn help control the extortionate heating prices and the energy efficiency link would both equalise each other out.
Well, Kazray, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Really do appreciate your time. What do you make of that, Tom?
I think it is an interesting point, but I think the government, to some extent, might be thinking a bit too much about global warming when it comes to housing regulation. And the reason I say this is people might notice that new builds have got uglier and uglier in the last couple of years. In particular, windows on buildings are getting smaller and smaller. And I think we've got a couple of pictures of some new builds that have been built in the last 2 years in the United Kingdom. Here they are. Look how tiny these windows are, particularly on the top floor. People listening on the radio will be able to imagine sort of nice, reasonable-sized houses, but with the most minuscule windows.
Looks like half windows.
Sort of half windows that only start halfway up the room. Well, this isn't by accident. This is government regulation, specifically Part O building regulations that were brought in June 2022. And guess what? These are coming about because the government is worried that with a warming planet, people will open windows more and be at risk of falling out of them. So the windows have to start higher up the room, genuinely.
Health and safety gone mad,
genuinely, to stop people falling out of first and second story windows. And so we're now getting houses that just look plainly ridiculous due to this government regulation. It's insane.
Well, you think you could be trusted to open a window, couldn't you?
You'd think personal responsibility comes into this a bit.
You would think. Let us know what you think of that. What do you make of those images, of those half windows on new homes? Let us know. gbnews@gbnews.com.
Well, Elon Musk is threatening to take Mark Zuckerberg to the courts, but find out why precisely after this.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Rain or showers for some of us today, but dry and bright for many, and it is going to feel warmer. We've got low pressure to the west of the UK, drawing up this hotter air from the near continent, and temperatures really significantly higher in places compared with July so far. But we have got some rain to talk about first of all. Scotland and Northern Ireland seeing those outbreaks of rain turn more to showers by the afternoon, and those showers will be heavy in places, particularly Western Scotland and Northern Ireland. But also the odd rumble of thunder. And for England and Wales, sunnier skies with rising temperatures, mid to high 20s widely, perhaps even 30 Celsius towards the southeast. Any cloud and showers in the north, though, clears away during the evening. And then clear spells for many for a time, with this southerly breeze drawing up warm air, so a muggy night to come. However, towards the southwest, we've got an area of cloud and some showers moving into Cornwall and Devon by the end of the night. 18 or 19 Celsius in the south, 15, 16 in the north, so a muggy night for sleeping, but plenty of sunshine for many as we begin the weekend, particularly towards the east. Towards the west, we've got these areas of cloud moving through, and during the morning, the chance of some showers for Wales, southwest England, moving into the Midlands, northern England, and the possibility of thundery rain, some intense downpours. However, ahead of that, we keep the heat. 32 Celsius are possible at high temperature in the southeast, fresher further west.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, welcome back. It's 11:28 and you're with Britain's Newsroom here on GB News with me, Tom Harwood, and Ellie Costello. And I have to say, we've had a deluge of emails this morning, particularly about our peculiar topic of conversation, baby names.
Yes, we've got you going this morning. Meghan Trainor, the US pop star, she's called her baby Barry. And apparently this is a trend now. All of these vintage names are coming back into fashion. So we asked you, what are the ones that you'd like to see, or what are the ones that you've heard of recently?
Absolutely.
Lots of you getting in touch.
Della has written in to say, it's Herbert for me. Herbert.
Oh, that's sweet.
It's a nice one.
And you call it Herbie.
Yes. Oh, Herbie's a good name.
That's a good name. Yeah, we're
I
with
do
you on
like a name that can also be shortened, so there's choice for the... I mean, I'm not actually called Tom. I'm called Thomas. That's what I was christened as, but I've always been Tom. But the thing is, I've got the choice, and that's quite nice.
Yeah, I like that. See, I'm actually Elizabeth, fun fact. I'm an Elizabeth, but shortened to Ellie. And I quite like that as well. I feel like...
Interesting. Elizabeth isn't often shortened to Ellie.
No, it's weird, isn't it? My parents don't really know what happened there. But it's quite nice when I go to the doctors and stuff and they ask for Elizabeth Costello. I just feel quite fancy. So it's nice to have those options. But lots of you getting in touch on that. We've got one here from Peter who says, our son asked for suggestions for our granddaughter's name. We suggested Darcy. They picked Elsie. It's growing on us now, says Peter. Elsie's nice.
Yeah, it's a nice name.
And it's one of those vintage names.
It almost sounds... I know it doesn't sound royal, but it almost sounds sort of fairy tale in a way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm thinking Elsa, I'm thinking Frozen.
Elsa, you're thinking Frozen. Tell them your 3 tips that you told me earlier, because it's very handy.
Three questions to ask a baby name. So it's about 3 different stages of life, whether this name fits in these different stages. Number 1, can name come out to play?
Yes.
Number 2, name I love you. Number 3, name is becoming chairman of the board.
Yes.
Now, if the name... And I think Ellie and Elizabeth works for all 3 of those.
Yes.
And the thing is, you've got... And I also think
does
to
Tom.
Tom, yeah, Tommy can come out to... I've never been a Tommy, though. But, yeah, there are some names that you definitely can work for all of them. There are some names that perhaps don't work in some of these situations and others. And, I don't know, write into us, gbviews@gbnews.com if you agree
But I think
with
it's
that
a really good
question
test.
classification.
You've really helped me there, Tom. I feel like I'm going to use that from now on. But do get in touch with your thoughts on that. Does that work for you, the 3-test rule? Let us know, gbviews@gbnews.com. But still ahead, when is the best time of year to make an IVF baby? That times in well with our naming baby theme. We're going to be finding out. But first, let's get your news with Rhiannon.
CEO Rhiannon, yes, got a ring to it. This is the GB Newsroom and it is 11:31. Here are your top stories. A woman continues to be questioned today over a car crash at a school in London which killed an 8-year-old girl. 16 people needed treatment after a Land Rover crashed into the study prep school in Wimbledon. The woman in her 40s remains in custody. She was arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. Travellers arriving in Dover for cross-channel ferries face long queues today. Delays in processing passengers are being blamed on French border officials carrying out extra checks. The wait time for cars is currently 1.5 hours, and for coaches it's 2. Passengers were stuck in traffic for more than 10 hours at the start of the Easter holiday period. The Deputy General Secretary of the National Education Union says it will be a real failure for the government if all 4 teaching unions vote to strike together. It comes as teachers across England walk out for a second day in the latest wave of strike action over pay. Members of the union warn there could be more strikes in the autumn term. And house prices fell at the fastest annual rate in 12 years last month. Halifax reports the average UK property price is down 2.6% in June compared with the same month last year. That's more than double the drop in May, marking the largest fall since 2011. The mortgage provider says the average house price for June was around £286,000. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2745 and €1.1714 euros. The price of gold is £1,503.05 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,254 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
Well, Twitter has threatened to sue Meta, that's the owner of Facebook, over its new Threads app. That's a copycat of Twitter. Are you keeping up? The founder of Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp, Mark Zuckerberg, launched this new app earlier this week to rival Elon Musk's Twitter.
And I just downloaded it in the newsroom and it was quite confusing, wasn't it? You were having to help me. But the new Threads app is aimed at the unhappy Twitter users after recent changes on the platform.
Well, the chief executive, Mark Zuckerberg, that's the chief executive of Meta and Threads. God, it's complicated, all these different names.
Yeah.
But he said on Thursday that more than 30 million people had signed up in the first 24 hours after this new app rolled out, putting it on track to become one of the most rapidly downloaded consumer apps at launch.
Well, joining us now to discuss this all is tech journalist Will Guyatt. Really good to see you this morning, Will. Wow, so much has happened, hasn't it, in the past week or so in the tech world. First of all, let's start with Threads. What do you make of it as an app? Because it is very, very similar to Twitter, isn't it?
It's going to be it's the fastest growing social media app of all time. We're around about 65 million signed up accounts now. As far as I'm concerned, Twitter is toast. It's done. It will still exist, but it won't have the audience, and this app is going to overtake it in terms of active users in days. Let's not forget that Twitter's been around now for quite a while. It's peaked at around about 350 million active monthly users. Even though you had the leader of the free world in Donald Trump tweeting from the toilet for several years, it didn't ever grow beyond 350 million users. So Mark Zuckerberg's got this mission. He wants to have the first public conversations app, which is what I think is a great name for the classification of these kind of apps. And he wants to get to 1 billion plus users, and I reckon he probably could do it.
It's so interesting, though, because Twitter is sort of going all in on the free speech sort of platform. Threads from Meta is a lot more restrictive on what you can post, perhaps more advertiser-friendly on what can be posted. Certain content moderation settings are there. Might that make Twitter still have a place, but perhaps a more niche place?
Yeah, exactly, Tom. I think that is where we're going to end up. It will have less users. The conversations will be more controversial. There'll be more of the people that your average everyday person might want to avoid. It's really tricky because you go into these situations and as soon as I say something like, this is going to be brilliant, I'm told I'm left-wing, I'm told I can't stand Elon Musk, and I'm told I'm too woke. But the reality is there is space for a kind of mainstream conversation app, and it would appear to me that Twitter is trying to push itself out of that position. One, we can say a couple of things for certainty since Elon Musk has owned it. Independent verification says that hate speech has risen. Independent verification also makes it very clear that some of the accounts that were banned, including Nazi sympathizers, have been allowed back onto the platform. And anecdotally from me, the whole of the Spider-Man No Way Home film was published on a verified Twitter Blue account and ran on the service for over 24 hours last weekend. There's a copyright issue there. There's a legal issue in that Sony Pictures can go and say, that's our film, take it down. That kind of content is taken down on other platforms in minutes. So something very big is changing at Twitter at the moment. And Elon Musk, let's see what he does with it. It's his train set now, and some people don't want to be there. I want to take objection with one thing you've said, and I never normally do this. This isn't intended to rival Twitter. It's intended to blow it out of the water, and it's intended to be more mainstream.
It's interesting, though, because there is a fairly significant market where currently the Threads app is not available. It launched in the UK, it launched in the US, it launched in Canada, Australia, Japan. It did not launch in the European Union. And the reason we understand why it didn't is because the EU passed this sort of heavy regulatory Digital Markets Act that is making Meta a little bit wary about launching new products there. My question: is it a Brexit benefit that we actually have access to this app at all?
Well, I was thinking that at 1 minute past midnight when it came out. This is the best thing that's ever come out of Brexit as far as I'm concerned, because I'm able to get the app. But it's an interesting story and it's an interesting view, because this was actually Meta. Meta took the decision not to submit this app for approval via the Irish Data Protection Office. It was their decision not to put it in. So there's either some negotiations going on, the lawyers are making some changes, or Meta is taking some kind of unusual stance, like it's just about to start doing in Canada. They're going to block news links completely from all of its platforms in Canada because of a new law coming in Canada, which means that news organizations should be paid when content is shared on social media. So there's all sorts of interesting stuff going on here. But the one thing I'll say that's the most interesting thing for me, this app does take a lot of your personal data, as does any Meta service. They are taking your personal data to sell you advertising, target your products, etc., etc., etc. But Tom, we all seem to have leapt back into the arms of Mark Zuckerberg from Elon Musk as a result of this. A huge chunk of that audience on Twitter have decided, I've had enough of this. I'm moving back over and going back over to Mark Zuckerberg. And it's taken the work of the world's richest man to push us over to the world's most powerful man on social media.
Oh, well, Guy, we better let you go. You're a man in demand, and you are brilliant. Thank you very much for your time.
That sounded like a Skype call noise.
Yeah.
That's owned by Microsoft as
Another
well.
one.
Yet another company. Although I don't think Bill Gates is in charge of Microsoft anymore. I think he's moved on to other things.
I think so.
Yeah.
But do stay with us. Lots more to come. We'll be going through the news of the day with our friends Charlie Rowley and Candice Holdsworth. Stay tuned. Welcome back. It's 11:43. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Tom Howard and Ellie Costello. Well, a new study has found that collecting eggs and fertilising them in the summer is 1/3 more likely to turn into a successful IVF pregnancy compared to if you do it in the autumn. Well, joining us now to explain this is Elise Daniel Barnes. Really good to see you this morning. So tell us more. What is this connection with the summer and fertilising eggs when you're going through IVF?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think some things to take into consideration is the vitamin D levels. When we are spending more time in the sun, having longer days, we're more likely to have sufficient vitamin D levels, which is really important in sperm and egg production, as well as sperm and egg quality. The other thing that is super important is improved mood. Again, we're seeing more sun, increased vitamin D. We may have more holidays and vacations, and so our mood is a little bit better, and we're spending a lot more time with family. So all those things are super important to keep in mind during the summertime.
No, really, really interesting stuff. Is it just if you're just happier, you're healthier? Is that a connection?
There's definitely some connection with mood and stress levels to infertility, but really that bigger piece comes from that vitamin D level, because research has shown that vitamin D is very important in that quality, which makes, the summertime a great time for increased vitamin D levels.
Do you think we're just understanding a lot more now about IVF? Has science got us this far?
Absolutely. There is research that is coming out every single day. Lots of people spending time on making sure we understand the process more. There still are a lot of things that we don't know, but new research is coming out every day that's helping us improve rates and pregnancy outcomes.
It's amazing. It really, really is good to see you this morning. Thank you so much. That's Elise Daniel Barnes, embryologist. Really good to have your thoughts on that story. It's remarkable, isn't it? 30% more likely to be fertilised.
Just from the time of the year. I mean, yeah. Well, IVF's been around for several decades now. I'm just surprised that we're only just learning this.
But as Elise says, we're learning all the time, and science has still got a long way to go. But it is
school day.
It's amazing that we can do that stuff, isn't it? Right, let's go through the papers, shall we? Because there's quite a few interesting stories floating around this morning. And we have our friend joining us this morning, writer and commentator Candice Holdsworth, and former special advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley. And they are here to discuss the latest headlines. We'll take you through some of those headlines now.
The Times leads with flight disruption, which could affect 1/3 of European holidays this summer, now as traffic controllers are threatening to strike.
The Daily Mirror leads with a horrific crash which killed one 8-year-old girl and injured 16 other people yesterday in Wimbledon after a Land Rover crashed into a prep school.
And The Guardian says that ministers have been ordered to hand over messages from the former Prime Minister to the COVID inquiry after losing a legal challenge.
And The Telegraph says the Archbishop thinks universities should face funding cuts for not supporting minorities.
And over to the Daily Mail, which shows the vehicle which crashed yesterday into that school, killing a girl aged 8 and injuring 16 others.
Well, Charlie and Candice are with us now. And Candice, let's start with a story in the Times, shall we? This headline, "The hills are alive with the sound of trigger warnings."
Yes. So this is a story in the Times about the actor Simon Callow, who criticised a theatre in Chichester for having a trigger warning about the sound of music, saying that it may contain a story about Nazis and the annexation of Austria. And it just seems so obvious that if you were going to see that, you would know that. And he says it doesn't require a trigger warning. I mean, when you go in to see something like that, you expect to feel lots of different things. I mean, that is what the theatre is for. I think that these trigger warnings are just the worst thing to happen to art and music and literature, because it tries to tell people how they should feel about things rather than letting them just go in and decide for themselves, assuming that people are all really fragile, and if they see something about the Nazis, they won't be able to handle it. It's so patronising.
I suppose it also removes agency from individuals. It's like, if I'm worried about something that I might go and see, why usually Google
Yes.
I usually Google things and sort of check what I'm... Is that agency being taken away from me? Do I have to be told everything that's coming in front of me in life? I think sort of there's a worry there, isn't there, about losing that agency?
Definitely. We're all being treated like children. In fact, it would be horrible to treat children that way. You know, assuming that they can't go and see something and decide whether they like it or whether they don't like it. If it's a bit much for them, they can leave. I don't know who these trigger warnings are for.
Well, that was my next question. It's who actually asks for these trigger warnings? Who actually needs them? Because surely we should just be exposed to things and then make up our own minds as to whether or not we agree with it. What do you make of it, Charlie?
Well, unless you're 16 going on 17. Thank you very much. Then you don't need a sort of age sort of attached to what's appropriate material. But I think you're absolutely right. We need to be exposed to things. The point of theatre is to make you think, it's to make you feel. You have to be uncomfortable in theatre. That's the only way sometimes that you get a message across, to make people go away and challenge their own views or thoughts about things that are sensitive, that can be difficult. But, you know, you can laugh, you can cry, you can smile. The whole point of theatre is to make you feel these kind of emotions, not to be dumbed down before you go and sit in that seat and just expect it to be sort of a nuanced experience. It has to be moving. And so
you shouldn't be tied up in brown paper packages with string.
Here we go. Here we go. You both can't resist. But you don't want that grey, boring, mundane experience at the theatre. You do want to feel things, don't you?
Absolutely. I worry that, you know, people are not going to take risks as much now. Well, I mean, we've got all the problem of sensitivity readers. And, you know, now authors, instead of just thinking, what do I want to say? What's my voice? They're worried how someone's going to react on Twitter. And I think that really destroys depth in literature.
Or indeed how their book might be edited 70 years after it's written by some publishing company or other. Should we move on to another story? Because we haven't really touched on this that much today, and it is such an important story, this horrific crash of this Land Rover into this school, Charlie. Do we know any more than we did yesterday?
No, is the answer. But I think, well, not to my knowledge, but it's a horrific story, as you say. An 8-year-old girl who, on her last day of term at this school, was enjoying a tea party with other pupils, with staff, waiting to be collected, I think, by her parents. And a Range Rover crashes through a barrier and obviously is injured. 16 other people who we need to hear an update on as to their condition. But a poor 8-year-old girl has tragically died, which moved, obviously, the police commissioner, chief constable in charge, when she gave a press conference yesterday, to tears.
Yes.
Because it is such a tragic story. And it alarmed a lot of people at first, because obviously in the area, Wimbledon, where Wimbledon's taking place, there were thoughts that it might have been some sort of terror attack. Now, obviously, that was confirmed that it wasn't quite quickly, which I think is a good thing. But you know, it's a woman has been arrested for dangerous driving, and you know, we can only wait to see what happens next. But it's a tragic accident which has left a family in total bits this summer.
I mean, you can only think of the community in Wimbledon as well. I mean, I was listening this morning to a neighbour in Wimbledon, to this school, who said even if it happened a day later than they'd be on their school holidays, it's absolutely tragic, isn't it?
These children will have experienced genuine trauma. I can only hope that they are getting the support they need, that their families need. I mean, they're going to be going into the holidays now in deep grief and deep shock.
It's just an absolutely horrific story, and of course our thoughts do go out with all of those who've been affected, especially the family of that little 8-year-old girl who lost her life yesterday. And hopefully we do get some answers of what exactly happened here.
Absolutely.
Because it's what everyone's asking this morning, aren't they?
Well, let's try and move on now, if we can, because, Candice, there is another story here about hundreds of thousands of people who left work during COVID, now struggling to find jobs.
Yeah, this is so interesting. So this is a story in The Times about the huge numbers of people that left the workforce, mainly the over 50s. There was about 600,000 people. They're now living in what they say is relative poverty. So, you know, they're earning quite a bit below the average income, and they're probably not going to be able to get to old age and survive on what they have.
But there are a lot of people who've just left the workforce and are not coming back into the workforce. Lots of people who might, perhaps they have chosen a bargain where they work less, they get less money, but ultimately they don't have to work and they're getting some money.
Yes, yes. Yeah, well, this is the thing. I mean, it's interesting you say that, because I was talking to a nurse anecdotally, and she was saying that a lot of older nurses just left after COVID because the stress was so intense. And it wasn't necessarily that they were financially sorted. They just wanted something else because they couldn't deal with everything that they'd had to deal with working in the hospitals during COVID. But a lot of them don't quite have the pension pot that they need. But they can't really be coaxed back into work because of the mental health issues that they suffered.
Yeah. But I suppose in this country you can live on a relatively low income. If, for example, you've paid off your mortgage, you're not going to do too many sort of fancy things. Perhaps some people have just taken that bargain and just thought, you know what, I'm 60, do I want to do another 6 years of work, or do I want to sort of live a perhaps more meagre life, but one that has less stress in it? That seems to be a bargain some people have taken.
Yeah, it's a really, really good point. I'm afraid that's time. Charlie and Candice, really good to see you both this morning. Thank you so much for joining us and picking such wonderful stories. We enjoyed it as well. And thank you, all of you, for your comments on Weetabix, on names. There's been so many of them. I'll just share a couple here. Weetabix in a bowl, a good squirt of honey and cold milk, says Alan. And Pamela says, I agree with Ellie's Weetabix.
And some names that have been brought in. Gary is a popular one in the inbox. Keith and Harry have been writing about that. Or indeed Ernest, which June has written in to say.
And the name Dave, I can see over there as well. That's it from us. The Live Desk is up next with Mark Longhurst and Pip Thompson.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Rain or showers for some of us today, but dry and bright for many, and it is going to feel warmer. We've got low pressure to the west of the UK, drawing up this hotter air from the near continent, and temperatures really significantly higher in places compared with July so far. But we have got some rain to talk about first of all. Scotland and Northern Ireland seeing those outbreaks of rain. Turn more to showers by the afternoon, and those showers will be heavy in places, particularly Western Scotland and Northern Ireland. But also the odd rumble of thunder. And for England and Wales, sunnier skies with rising temperatures, mid to high 20s widely, perhaps even 30 Celsius towards the southeast. Any cloud and showers in the north, though, clears away during the evening. And then clear spells for many for a time, with this southerly breeze drawing up warm air, so a muggy night to come. However, towards the southwest, we've got an area of cloud and some showers moving into Cornwall and Devon by the end of the night. 18 or 19 Celsius in the south, 15, 16 in the north, so a muggy night for sleeping, but plenty of sunshine for many as we begin the weekend, particularly towards the east. Towards the west, we've got these areas of cloud moving through, and during the morning, the chance of some showers for Wales, southwest England, moving into the Midlands, northern England, and the possibility of thundery rain, some intense downpours. However, ahead of that, we keep the heat. 32 Celsius are possible at high temperature in the southeast, fresher further west.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.